Thank you. In this talk today, I'm going to talk about paradata and about data makers and users' views on what is useful paradata. And paradata refers to process documentation, data about processes and practices relating to different things. What I'm going to talk about here is paradata relating to research data. That's the question of documenting the origins and whereabouts, the processing of research data during its lifetime. This work is based on findings from a project called Capturing Paradata for Documenting Data Creation and Use for the Research of the Future, or CAPTCHA for the short, that officially closed by the end of last year, but there is still quite a lot of work we're conducting at the moment. The team is a bit larger than, of course, only me, and I've been having the privilege of working with a team of wonderful colleagues in this project throughout the years. The problem I'm going to talk about today, so it's the problem of that there's a lack of contextual knowledge on the creation and use of research data. And that's one of the big hurdles when it comes to open science, data reuse, and kind of conducting research in the current digital era. We might know enough about data, kind of what the data is and what it's representing. That is usually termed as metadata. But the problem is that we don't really kind of know where the data comes from, how it was sampled, how it was produced, what decisions were made throughout of its creation, and then later on how it was processed, what motivations, what ideas there were about the use of the data in the first place, and then how it's been used ever since. All of this is something that is important to know when you are planning to do something with the data and trying to understand kind of the extents and the limitations of it and where and how you can use it. And to tackle with this problem, so one of the approaches is to think about documentation, kind of how we can know about the origins and whereabouts of data. And paradata is a concept that was originally coined in social science survey research in the 1990s, from where it spread first visualization, heritage visualizations research in the beginning of 2000s. And then from there, it has been sipping into other fields. We have been looking into research data, but then other contexts where it's been used to diverse extents are, for instance, they are archival and records management, and then also it's been increasingly used in relation to the documentation of AI and advanced technologies and their use. From the simple definition to kind of a more fundamental definition of what paradata is. So our definition of paradata is that it is most productively seen as a category of things that can be appropriated as informative of processes and practices. So this means that rather than being a specific kind of data, so that we could go out and see that, okay, kind of there's a pile of paradata and besides there's a pile of metadata. So the thing is really what makes paradata is that paradata is it is something that is, if it's used as paradata, if it's useful as paradata, so then it functions as such, and it is meaningful to talk about paradata as paradata. And it can be many different kinds of things. It's not only kind of formal data, but it can be documentation of different kind. So it can really be many different kinds of things. And the only kind of important thing here is that it is something that can be appropriated as informative of different types of processes in relation to data when we're talking about research paradata. In this talk, I'm going to talk more closely about the findings that we published in one article, Data Makers and Users' Views on Useful Paradata, Priorities in Documenting Data Creation, Curation, Manipulation, and Use in Archaeology. The empirical case in CAPTCHA project has been archaeology. It's a wonderful context to study different types of data processes. It's very complex, theoretical and methodologically very diverse. And then archaeologists are also working with a wonderful diversity of different types of data, from physical objects to textual sources to kind of natural science measurements. So you get it all more or less when you study archaeological research data management. The research questions that were guiding this particular paper are: first, what information on data-related processes and practices, that is paradata, do those who have used archaeological data consider important? Then secondly, what information on data-related processes and practices, that's again paradata, do those who have made and or deposited archaeological data consider important? So we look at the user perspective and then the data creator perspective. And then thirdly, what similarities and differences in the perceived usefulness of various types of paradata, if any, can be identified among data makers and users? So we're interested in the differences between data makers and data users' perspectives to what kind of paradata is useful. And here, some of the let's say starting points for the study were that researchers need information about data to use it. Data isn't some kind of a raw material that you can just take and use in different ways without knowing something about it. Then another starting point is that too little is known about data practices, as already mentioned in the framing of the whole project. And then an observation underpinning the study is that data-related information needs are contextual. So kind of what people need to know about data in general and about data-related processes. So it really depends on what from what context in a very broad sense they are coming from, what type of research they are doing, what kind of use they are planning, what kind of theoretical assumptions they have, what kind of methodological ideas they have, and so forth. Then finally, we assumed in the beginning, or hypothesized, that there is a gap between what data makers make available and what data users need. And this is a very basic hypothesis in a sense, because the problems of data documentation are well documented and also experienced by both data creators and users. Data is documented in many different ways, and sometimes very meticulously, but it doesn't really guarantee that the data would be found useful by eventual users when they start reading and working with it. So something is missing, but what is missing and why things are missing, so we don't really know that too well. The paper I'm talking about here, it was based on a short, not short survey because the survey was very long, but it was directed to kind of people that are sort of heavy users of paradata and data documentation in archaeology. We were really going for a qualitatively high quality research or kind of sample in the survey, rather than trying to reach out to the masses who might not have done much anything to contribute to the study. So in that sense, we kind of designed a fairly long and intensive survey rather than going very extensive with the questions. It was an online survey, and the aim of the survey was, broadly speaking, to broaden the understanding of the variety of different paradata practices, opportunities, and problems, and gather basic information on the variety of paradata needs. It was a convenient sample. We submitted invitations to participate in the survey to different relevant contacts and asked them to spread them to the people they know that they might find relevant from this perspective. Then we also have a very broad international network of people working with archaeological data throughout Europe, from the past cost action, cost arc work, and similar networks in computational archaeology and archaeological data management. The survey was running in 2020 and 2021, and there were different sections on use, making, and basic demographics, including professional background, country where the people were based in and the length of research career. And the data is available to download at the Uppsala University research data repository via the Swedish National Data Service. So you can play with the data and do whatever you like with it if you like. The sample was quite international, although representing mostly the global north. This isn't very surprising considering the demography of, let's say, kind of data-intensive archaeology. So yeah, well, it's still reasonably representative of the people who actually kind of do something in relation to these kinds of issues. We had 79 complete responses, a little bit more, but some of them we need to take away because of different issues in the completeness of the responses. A little bit less females. Mostly, most of the respondents had used data collected or created by others. About half had deposited data. 1/3 were temporarily employed, not very surprising in academia. Half were researchers, half were administrators, archivists, although many of the respondents were involved in different types of duties. Length of the career the span was quite high, from 1 to 45 years, with median in 14 years. When we look at the different responses to the survey, so when it comes to the data users or the data use perspective, here it's important to kind of take into account that we weren't kind of categorizing individuals as data users or data makers per se, but we were asking the respondents to if they had both created and used, so they could take the both surveys or both sections in the survey. So this is really about the perspectives of data use and data creation. There were different priorities. General context was very commonly appreciated by the survey participants. What data was not collected, names of methods, standard operating procedures, and so forth were appreciated by the data users. Then, when it comes to data makers, so we could see that there were quite a lot of similar things were mentioned by them, although there are some differences when it comes to kind of archiving data. And this is where the study gets interesting, because it's quite apparent that there were some more references to following different types of protocols, systems, and kind of explanations of more kind of formal types of descriptors, whereas from the use perspective, the focus was really on kind of explaining the sort of the narrative and kind of what was done, how to make the data understandable. Then thinking about kind of how much and what the respondents thought about the reusability of archaeological data. So the majority of the respondents said that yes, they could use the data they were encountering, but then again 1/3 were thinking that no, it wasn't really like they had planned. And even though you could say that yes, the majority was positive and the minority was negative, so it still shows that archaeological data isn't really that reusable in the end, and there are many hurdles to address before the data really gets mostly reusable. Of course, here the problem is that that kind of when a data user or potential data user first envisions or thinks something that, okay, kind of yes, I would like to use a particular data set in a specific way. So in many cases, before engaging with the data itself, it can be very difficult to say whether it really fits the purpose and is useful. You can't necessarily say it on the basis of the documentation only. So reaching the ideal 100% of yes here to this question, so it's probably never going to happen. If it's going to happen, so then it's probably saying something about what is understood as data use, and the data use might be too simplistic considering what different opportunities the different data sets might have. Then we also asked what types of tools the respondents used to document the data and data collection and creation procedures. And here we have to consider that this is archaeology, and many of the respondents had done, at least to a certain extent, field archaeology, where taking photographs is quite common. But here we can see that taking photos using spreadsheets, online, offline, using word processors or text editors to document things, handwritten notebooks are also quite common in archaeological field work, but also in lab work, similarly to many other field and laboratory sciences. And to a lesser extent, there were diverse other tools were kind of mentioned in the survey. What is maybe to note here that dedicated notebook or diary software like Jupyter notebooks, so they weren't used that much by the respondents to this survey, maybe partly suggesting that these are still sort of coming and not really there, and then also that their uptake is limited to certain areas of research and data creation, rather than that they would have become, let's say, kind of general tools for everybody to work with. Then it's interesting to look at the differences, and here is it can be a bit difficult to see on the screen, of course, but you can zoom in, so it will probably help a little bit. But kind of really, what are the major differences between users and creators that were somehow difficult to see from the previous diagrams, where we just looked into the average scores for different kinds of information. But this shows pretty clearly that there is some variation across the spectrum, and it's of course there are many different reasons and ways to explain the minor differences. What is obvious here is that the general contextual information is appreciated by everybody, a little bit less by users and a little bit more like by the creators, but still it's very much kind of the key thing that both groups were appreciating. Whereas if we look at the differences, where the differences were significant, so quite clearly creators are much more focused on reporting funding, about names of everybody who was involved in data creation, and then also reporting on the permissions relating to the use of the data. Whereas then users appreciate these a whole lot less. It's much less interesting and important for the reusability of the data to know about how the data generation, data collection was funded. It's not really that important from the perspective of the usability of the data to know about the permissions. Okay, if you don't have permissions, so then it's quite obviously that you can't use the data, but then if you have the permission, so then it's not really kind of that crucial to know a whole lot more about what the permissions are and what kind of licenses were used and so on. So this is a little bit kind of it shows of the perspective what is important for creators and then users, and let's say kind of what kind of information on the different issues is useful and meaningful. And then also users don't really necessarily need that much to know the names of everybody involved in data creation. And this could be explained quite well by that the names tell something about the origins of the data, and then it can be used as a proxy for the reliability and maybe the credentials of the people who have been participating. Are they experts or are they amateurs? But then on top of that, the data is useful if it's useful independent of who is a specific individual who was involved in the process. And here we can see the same differences a little bit clearer, and we can also see that there are other differences as well, as I mentioned, but they weren't kind of that great. Some what you can see some differences is that there are similar aspects of the documentation that are less interesting for the users and more interesting to the creators, and these relate to aspects like legislation, giving the credentials of everybody, being very explicit about tools, what were used in the data creation and so forth. So there's a quite clear trend in that users sort of lean to certain kinds of kind of information, where the creators are focused on the different ones. And from a related study where we conducted factor analysis of the results, so it showed clearly that you could see that there are different constellations of information that are useful from the use perspective, and that are important from the documentation perspective, and that kind of analysis showed clearly that the sort of a cluster of information relating to standards and guidelines used in the data creation. So that was something that emerged only from the data making perspective, whereas the users weren't that much focused on this particular kind of information. So the differences between what data makers and users and research and administrators consider important to document on data making, so there are differences, and these differences are quite meaningful. They might not be extremely explicit, and kind of on a superficial level. Both groups are interested in understanding and conveying understanding of kind of where the data came from, how it was created, and so forth. But kind of what types of information is important from their respective perspectives. So there's a clear difference. Then kind of on the basis of these results, so it was also clear that what we could extrapolate was that there is a kind of a difference between data makers and data users, but then there's also specific aspects that are important for data administrators, and the aspects that are important for data administrators, they are not necessarily the things that are then prioritized by data makers and data users. And this is again a question of perspective, kind of how they look at the data, what they are planning to do with the data, and what is, let's say, their interpretation of proper documentation and close enough understanding of what it's all about. So as a sort of thinking about the implications of these results, so you can say that data makers appear to prioritize information that's makeable, kind of information that is possible and easy to create at the moment when the data is created. And this is what a data maker documents. Partial reason is, of course, that from a data maker's perspective, it can be difficult, and it's in practice impossible to envision what the different data users in the future might think of or need. So kind of documenting from that kind of a premise, it's not really going to work. And this kind of sort of directs their attention to what they can do. But then also the whole process of data making, so it opens up as a very different kind of process from the perspective of data makers than it does from the perspective of data users. Then data users, so they prioritize information that makes data understandable. And the idea here, what we think is that when a data user gets or finds a data set or is about to find a data set, so they really try to make sense of what is it in the data set and trying to understand how the data set was created, and from the perspective of creating the data set, so they want to understand that whether the data is useful for their purposes, for their task in hand. And there maybe kind of the technical details about the data making are not as important as the general conveying of an understanding of what the data set is all about and whether it fits into the purpose. Then if we draw in administrators that weren't kind of directly looked into this particular study, but they were data administrators in our dataset as well. And we have also conducted interview research with data administrators. So we can quite comfortably say that administrators have a third perspective and they prioritize information that's administrable. So kind of trying to squeeze the understanding information on the process in such form that kind of fits neat in the research data management systems and data management standards. So this is something that administrators come to prioritize, and these are partly different things that kind of naturally and easily come out of the data making processes, and also different from what data users kind of really would need. And also not only about kind of the actual information content, but also kind of in which form the information is communicated. So it is different for data administrators, and the form of information that's administrable, it's different from that's easy for data users to understand. So on the basis of these findings, you can say that there's a gap between existing documentation and needs, and the gap that is there, it's not surprising because of the difference of perspectives. Data users and data makers think differently because of the different practices they are involved in. And there is no kind of easy way to kind of really bridge the gap, definitely. But what definitely helps is to understand that the gap is there, and kind of when data makers are creating and documenting data and data creation processes, so it's important to think that that as a data maker, your perspective is not the same than data users, and you kind of really need to take the data user's perspective in order to try to make the best out of the documentation. Then also for data users, so not to expect that the data makers would kind of sort of serve you data and data documentation as some sort of pret-a-porter thing, but more like that it is made from their premises, and you have to understand, and you need to kind of do certain kind of research in the data documentation and in the data itself to really understand whether it's usable. So some questions remain. What paradata informs best and when? This is a question that needs to be inquired, investigated in different domains and different contexts of data creation and use separately. There are some general patterns that can be identified, but kind of how they come together and what is really important. So it really depends on what kind of data it is and what kind of context the data making is taking place in, and the same in relation to data reuse, kind of where the data is being reused. Then we need to know more about the practices of working with paradata. That's what we have been conducting a lot of research about, kind of what how data is paradata is being created, how it's being used, and this is something that you can find more information and findings about this in our other studies. It's also important to consider different tools and methods for paradata work. What are the ones that work best for different purposes and for different people who are interacting with the data. What are the best ones for data making? What are the best ones for kind of getting an understanding of data related processes out of the data documentation and the data itself. And then, of course, we have been focusing very much on archaeological data, so there is a whole lot of room for continuing research and work in relation to paradata process and data documentation outside the context of archaeology. Many of the insights from our project can be applied more or less directly to other contexts, but there are many differences in what is the most significant aspects and what is really something that needs to be prioritized in other contexts. And coming to the end, so if you're interested in paradata, there are 2 books out, open access, that you can read, either partially or as a whole. The yellow book is a collection of chapters that represent different perspectives on paradata from different research fields, from computational biology to archival and records management to archaeology and legal scholarship. And then the second one is the binocular book, is a first really comprehensive interdisciplinary monograph on paradata, and it includes theoretical consideration about paradata, and then a discussion about the concept, and then also chapters on methods for working with paradata from data use, data creation, and data management perspectives. And having said that, so I thank you for your time today, and thank you.